of the fantasy spectrum, and my name's Isabel Flay, or you can call me Izzy. I suppose we start things off, so please introduce yourself, the type of fantasy you write, and your books. Well, I'm Izzy. This is my debut novel, Mystic City Souls and Spirits. It's essentially Crescent City meets Shadowhunters, and I write in urban romantasy.
Hi, I'm Mark Ashelman. I write Portal Fantasy. This was my debut, Dawn Left Behind. It is, I don't know what to compare it to be honest. It's appropriate for young adults and older, so I don't push it into a small area. So yeah, it's a magic, kind of science fiction type vibes as well, a bit of steampunk in there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Danielle D. Drummond. I write contemporary fantasy. This is my debut, A Kingdom of Curses. Book 2 is also out, A Bloodline of Secrets. A lot of your usual tropes, but it's kind of paranormal / fantasy. So it's an interesting vibe.
I'm Natasha Madden. I write a lot of different stuff. I've got paranormal romance, I've got urban fantasy, romantasy, I've written a romantic suspense as well, but my debut, Chosen by Destiny, is a duet, which is urban fantasy, running on the descendants of Little Red Riding Hood, and it's got a mix of Greek and Irish mythology, because I couldn't pick. I wanted both.
Next question, what inspired you towards the specific genre of your fantasy shows? Well, I think just because we live in a modern world, I found that a lot easier to base my story off of that, and all my beloved books and shows growing up, such as The Mortal Instruments, or you may know as Shadowhunters, like I said before, Kate Daniels series, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Crescent City. That's what inspired me to write urban fantasy, which I love.
My Portal Fantasy essentially came about because someone close to me passed away, and I wanted to write something with a main character inspired by him. So that's why I went the Portal Fantasy route, so that I could base it at the start on being just a contemporary place, and then he moves into this other place where the guy who passed away would have loved to have read that, and I would love to have read this. So it kind of made sense, and I also wanted to have a very unique world that hadn't really been done before. I've read a lot of high fantasy and that type of thing, but I didn't want to push myself into that. I wanted to have something where there was a little bit of steampunk, a little bit of sci-fi, fantasy, a couple of tropey type things pulled in. There is a race that's very similar to elves, but I definitely wanted something that wasn't out there. So I kind of spent a lot of time just sitting there building out that world in a giant Word document, and then creating a story based on that world.
So I grew up reading a lot of paranormal when I was very young. PC Cast, Melissa Mayers. I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer as well. That was a classic for me when I was young. I know. It's still one of my favourite series today. And then as I got older, I progressed into more of a fantasy world, and I was reading, I'm trying to think, sorry. So I was reading more fantasy, and I really like the elements of paranormal, but I wanted that in a fantasy world. I didn't want it in our world. So I decided I was going to do a mashup of that. So my book, it's contemporary fantasy. So it's got elements of the real world, but it's got shifters, it's got fae, it's got witches, it's got centaurs, there's even gods. So I really wanted to mash them both up together. I had the ending of this first book sitting in my head for about 15 years, and I wasn't sure how I was going to bring fantasy into paranormal together. And it was actually reading Crescent City, the very first book, that I was like, oh, you can do this. You can write epic fantasy in a more modern world. Because before that, I had not read a contemporary fantasy, like a high fantasy book. So that was when I put pen to paper and was like, I'm going to try and do this. I'm going to try and bring the story that I've had in my mind for so long and write it how I want to write it. And that's how Kingdom of Curses came about. So, yeah.
Okay. So, growing up, I had the biggest overactive imagination. Like, I would scare the shit out of myself. Like, honestly, I would just I didn't even have to read anything, watch anything. I would just have these crazy daydreams. And I loved Peter Pan, The Goonies, Alice in Wonderland, anywhere you could escape into another world. I loved it. And Little Red Riding Hood was one of my favourite fairy tales. And then when I found the Grimm Brothers version, I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And all growing up, I've always wanted to write. But I thought people would laugh at me. I'm like, write a book, people would laugh at me. Even my son, when I first started, I think he was 9, he said, why are you even bothering, Mum? You're not going to be like these people pointing at the big authors. And I was like, I don't have to be. Yeah, I forgot where I was going. Yeah, I totally lost track, sorry. Yeah, one day, climbing a mountain, completely puffed out, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go. I'm just going to write it. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't even have to be published. I wasn't even planning on publishing it. In the end, I got so excited about my story that I did publish it, indie publish. And it's just a big mix on, like I said, Greek and Irish mythology. They're my favourite growing up at school. Little Red Riding Hood, you've got the Shadow Hunters, that was a big part of it. And, you know, I love Twilight. Not the movies, I love the books. I watch the movies now and I cringe a little. But yeah, so it's like I love the witches, the werewolves, the shifters, the fae, like, I love it all. So I probably went a little bit overboard with the duet, throwing everything I loved into it. And I probably could have like spaced it out a little bit, but yeah, no, love all my fantasy stuff. I've always escaped from the real world with my books, with my imagination, with my movies. Love it all. So all my books, except for one, are fantasy. I love creating worlds, making my own stuff, making it the way I wish it was. So yeah, that's me.
Love it. Okay, I also wrote my answer down a little bit just to help jog my memory. But the next question, how did you craft your main characters so they feel like a natural part of the world while still keeping their journey compelling and believable to readers? Well, for me, my main character Layla, I developed her as a flawed individual. It was important to me to make her feel human and real in a world of supernaturally gifted people. Sometimes, you know, I just want the reader to hopefully relate to her as, you know, I relate to her myself. I wrote her when I was a bit younger as well, not that I'm not young. But I just want people to relate to her, not because she's special, but because she is in fact human. And despite having magical systems and books and her sisters having magic and this and that and everything, I want her to still deal with family struggles, you know, deaths and experience grief and loss. And while she's young, doesn't mean you still can't dip your toe in all those more, less happy emotions, you know, while she can experience joy and just have a great time at school with her friends in high school, university, study, all of that. I still want her to go through life and go, hang on, just because the world is special and magical out there doesn't mean there still aren't struggles in everyday life, and I want to blend that together and showcase it, which is probably where my love for urban fantasy, incorporating the elements of a high fantasy like Crescent City or just the magic witches and fae. I mean, you still have to have laws and legit things happening, so yeah, I like it.
Well, because my main character was based off someone in the real world, it was pretty easy to kind of know who he was. put that personality into the character in the book. The grief that he goes through in the book was kind of a bit of a mirror on how I felt losing him. So that was also quite easy to draw on something to really put that into the character. And when he goes through into this other world and exploring, I had to kind of explore myself, how I was building this world and how I was dealing with the different things that were in there and how I would react in that situation. So I put all of that type of thing into what he's going through and what his friends are going through that go through the portal with him. I also find it very important in fantasy that even the side characters they're interacting with are still very human in the way that they interact with people, and they have emotions as well, and they react to things going on in their own world. So having my main character and his friends being so different in terms of race, different to the other side characters in the book and who they interact with, there's still that common humanity in how they interact with each other and how they react to certain events going on. So I think that kind of grounds the whole fantasy element with the readers to be able to relate themselves with even these fantastical characters that are in this completely made-up world.
Yes,
Sorry.
It's a bit of a lengthy one. How did you craft your main characters so they feel like a natural part of the world while still keeping the journey compelling and believable towards readers?
Sorry.
It's like a... I was like, hang on.
I was like, okay, so for me, like I said, I've been sitting on this story for a really long time, and Paige was kind of growing with me as I was growing. I've always said, main character or not, every single character that I ever write on Paige is me. There is a part of me to that person. So writing for me is really vulnerable because I'm putting my deepest, darkest secrets down the page. And it can be quite scary and confronting sometimes to do that. But I will look at every single character and I have a list. I have a list for everything. I have a list and I write down, their greatest fears, their likes, their dislikes. Do they have any quirks? How would they respond in certain situations? And I write it all out. And if I feel like there's something that's too two-dimensional there, I will look inside myself and go, how would I react in this situation? What have I been through in my life that I could draw from to be able to make this character have a legitimate response to a certain situation? And I think it's really important to do that when you're exploring characters and their emotions. Everybody's gone through some sort of trauma, so you really need to look at all of those elements to a character, in my opinion. You can't just write, oh, there's this person and I want him to be, a cinnamon roll. It's like, what makes him that? What has he been through in his life to be that type of person? So, yeah, like, for me, all my characters are very personal and I spend a lot of time with them, a lot of time getting to know them. And sometimes I find myself in real life, I'll see something happening and I'll be like, that is how Guy would react, or that is how Quentin would react. So they become real characters in my mind, like real people in my mind. So I think for me, that is how I build my characters out. So then when I finally do put them on paper, they feel like real people.
I'm exactly the same.
Yeah.
Every character has a little piece of me in it, and it's how I would react in certain situations or what I would do. I've also got a very big family, so sometimes I tend to draw on certain personalities. I have 5 brothers, it's a nightmare. So a lot of the side characters especially will have some of their quirks because it's easier to draw on what you've experienced. It's easier to write what you know. I don't want to just guess what my character would do or how they'd react. I want to use real life, use real experiences. Yeah, like I did put a lot of me into my first book, and I didn't realise it until someone I knew read it, and they're like, "Oh my god, you just wrote yourself into a book," and I was like, "What? No, I didn't." I've gotten better. I've gotten better with my characters, but yeah, it's definitely a very personal and trying to keep things as real as possible, so that way readers do feel like they connect with them and they are finding that common ground with the characters.
I'm not sure how long this panel is meant to go for. I do have an extra question and then some audience questions. So the last question is, was there a moment during your writing where the world or characters surprised you and changed the direction of your story? I was just thinking of this one on the spot right now, actually. My male main character, Grim, he is a Grim Reaper, and I used to just have the idea of him just being a Grim Reaper. Like, that was just where he came from. He's been that since the dawn of time. He's a Grim Reaper. And I thought, no, I need something, a reason why. No one just wants to be a Grim Reaper, but he was a human who got cursed and wanted to save his family from dying. And so the exchange was, okay, you have to reap souls for all eternity to bring back your family. And of course, the person who made the bargain with him tricked him. But not to spoil the rest of it, I wanted side effects of being a Grim Reaper, instead of just going, okay, I'm suddenly reaping souls and still living my day-to-day life. Yeah, I can go to Kmart, have a great time, get some ice cream, and go down to the pub. I wanted to have repercussions of that, and so that comes with like physically being sick. He literally chucks up in a bush every time he comes back from the afterlife. I want him to, have to excuse himself from his workplace, like incorporating urban modern life into the effects of supernatural. You can't just go to a workplace and be a vampire. Like you need a reality check. And so with Grim, he's a Grim Reaper. Okay, what else comes with that? Does he see people's souls as they're sitting here right now, what they're feeling? So that kind of changed the trajectory of my story with him. Instead of just being a Grim Reaper and having a cool, awesome time, he really struggled. He's like the reluctant chosen one. He did not want this, and now he's dealing with it every single day. Yeah.
With this book, not so much. I'm a massive plotter, so I had everything pretty well down and how it was going to go. For me, the book I'm writing now, which is book 2 in this series, it was not meant to even be a thing. Book 3 was meant to be book 2, and I realised that I didn't want to actually move the characters away from where they were at that point in time. So this book 2 is the most pantsy I've ever been. So I'm kind of letting what happened in book 1 dictate what is going in this book. I had a few notes going into it about where I wanted it to go, but I'm relying a lot more on how these characters were in book 1 to then dictate where they're going and how they're interacting to everything going on, and how they're growing and learning. So that's made a huge impact in how I'm writing now for book 2. But I've still managed to keep it contained enough to not ruin my ideas for book 3.
My answer is going to be very different. So, this book, I completely pantsed. Did not plot, did not outline anything. I started writing and didn't stop for 3 months. I just kept writing and writing. But like I said, I'd had this story in my head for quite a while, so I knew where it was going to go. But I channeled my characters. So I'll be certain this is going to be a scene and something's not going to happen for like another 2 books or something. And I'll be writing, just writing. And then I'll be like, what the fuck happened then? And all of a sudden, my character will go and do something completely left field, and I'm like, okay, well now that just happened, and I have to deal with the fallout. And I have to reorganise everything. And it happens quite a lot. Book 2, I plotted and outlined, and it still happened. I was like,
It's just, I went down a rabbit hole with it, and I was like, well, they have to go somewhere. Let's go to fairy. And it was just supposed to be one book about a girl going to fairy and finding a prince, and then it just went off the rails, and all this other stuff happened. Now it's 3 books, and probably a spin-off. But characters just, they make their own mind up what they want to do. They don't follow guidelines. They don't follow a script. It's, yeah. They just do their own thing, and we write the story.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
I don't think any of my books have ever gone per outline. They've all just, it's in the moment. Like you said, like as you're writing it, how they would naturally react. You don't want to make it forced. Yeah.
Alright, I believe there's 5 minutes left. I'm not sure how long.
10:30.
10:30. Oh, thank you. Goodness me. Alright, I'll get talking. I feel like I'd love you guys to help me out with asking the audience a few questions, and then maybe you guys could ask us some questions. So feel free to ask the audience some questions. I've talked too much, you know.
We've got questions.
Why fantasy?
Okay. Take it away. Someone
Okay.
else. Go for it.
I'm going to take it back to something you said at the beginning. I've always had a very overactive imagination. Even when I was really young, I'd make up the weirdest stories and tell my parents these stories, and I'd be like, it really happened. It really happened. And
Yeah,
they'd be like,
believe your own stuff.
yeah. And my parents were like, no, there was no yellow and black striped man sitting in a tree outside your window. I was like, but he was there. And I would read fantasy books, or like, not fantasy, fairy tales when I was younger. And I would do really weird things, like I would stick buttons in them, and they would be like portal buttons to take me into the world. I was a weird kid, I will admit it.
I'm right there with you.
So I think, I also had a lot of like struggles as a child. I didn't really quite understand myself, and I think fairy tales and fantasies was like a way to escape and for me to accept the weirdness that was happening in my mind. And then even as I got older, I tried to fit myself in a box. Like, this is how I'm supposed to be. Now I'm supposed to go and get a job, I'm supposed to get married, have children, and do all of those sorts of things. I never did any of it. I mean, I got a job, but I didn't get married or have kids. But I still never quite fit. It was not something, I wasn't supposed to fit in a box. And
Sometimes it feels like you're not supposed to be in the real world.
yes, exactly.
I always thought I was born in the wrong era, but
Yeah,
then I look at the corsets and I'm like, I don't think I could have done that either.
I've always said the same thing. I used to say to my dad all the time, I was born in the wrong time. I was not supposed to be born now. I was supposed to be born like 100, 200 years ago.
Yeah.
So for me, writing fantasy is my way of taking me to a place where I can feel comfortable and I can explore those other parts of my body and the other parts of my mind. And
free.
yeah, and I also found it was quite healing and therapeutic. I spent a lot of money on therapy and then I wrote a book, and all of those years in therapy I was able to, identify and work through in one book. And I was like, wow. And I think that's because you can also safely explore traumas and world events that don't sit right with you. It's a safe space to be able to work through those in your mind.
Until you get a bad review and it's like,
It's a personal shit. So yeah, I think, like, for me anyway, that's definitely why. And I've dabbled in contemporary romance and dark romance as well, and I always come back to fantasy. I've got the third book in the series, which is already drafted, and I've got 2 other books that I've written, and they're being released in the next 6 to 8 months, and they're both fantasy as well. That is where I am most comfortable. Yeah.
For me, growing up, sci-fi and fantasy, everything. I'd watch other things, but it just never had the same effect on me. Huh?
Stargate.
Stargate.
Love Star.
Stargate, Star Wars, Star Trek.
Creative with his name.
I mean, Willow.
Oh,
Anything that was,
Firefly.
Firefly, Serenity. There's
yes.
So I'd watch anything that was science fiction or fantasy. I just love, I guess, the escapism of going into this completely fantastical world. My novella that I've also written is a contemporary sweet romance, which was well outside of my expertise in genre. So I'm very proud of writing it, but it was definitely a challenge, and I find it a lot easier to just go into the fantasy elements of just what I've grown up loving. It's just a lot easier for me to write in that genre.
I'm hearing no boundaries.
Yes.
Well, the other thing as well is, for me, I was really surprised writing this book, even though it's appropriate for like teenagers going up to adults. I was surprised at how much of my politics came through in it. I wasn't planning on doing that. So it's also an easy way to express those politics in a way that's going to have less people using that really annoying word woke and stuff like that, and just being really judged on the type of themes that I'm pushing through in my books. I'm not trying to kind of push anyone else in those directions, but it's what feels right for me. And I've noticed as well in a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, it has a lot of aspects of oppression and marginalized people and rebellions and all of that type of thing. So it kind of fits pretty well.
Yeah, so no boundaries plus freedom.
Yeah.
Yes. Any other questions?
I'm curious to know what your 9-year-old thinks now.
No, he loves it. The kids are both very supportive now. I think everyone at school knows I write books. They're my biggest marketers. I think he's proud of me. My daughter loves my books. She's got posters. I've printed posters on my covers. She's like, "When can I read them?" And I'm like, "When you're 16." I don't even know if I wanted to read them, to be honest. My mother-in-law's been banned from one book completely. Yeah, my son, he's great. He's actually said, so I'm currently writing a pirate fantasy, and I've asked my son to, because he does comics and he does D&D, I said, "Can you make me up a couple of monsters?" And he's like, "Oh yeah," and he's really interested in it. I said, "But you have to draw them," because he loves drawing. And he's like, "Oh." But yeah, no, he's way more on board now. I think he saw that I wasn't going to let it stop me. Like, I love it.